So first I want to say thank you very much to everyone for coming. It's, to me, not just I say it's not out of gratitude, but amazement. First, the effort put forth by Congregation Magen David, by the sponsors, by the organizers, by the people who sit here for hours and hours on end on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Rui Shmona Asar B'Tammuz, and Nidche, and on a fast day to sit and learn Tanakh and learn Tanakh and learn Tanakh, and specifically those chapters of Tanakh that are so topical. To have 7 straight shiurim, what does different perspectives, different approaches, different aspects of the Churban. So perhaps it's only fitting that we finish with something that would appear at first glance to be non-connected whatsoever, and that is Nehemia Tet. What I call the perek, the chapter that teaches us how to really rebuild a people. I want to thank Jesse especially for asking me to do this chapter. This is one of my favorite chapters. Nehemia is my favorite book, and chapter 9, perek Tet, is my favorite chapter in this book. And you'll see why. I want to start with a simple observation. We are the stories that we tell. And what occurs in the past is important, but how we understand what occurs in the past, I think, is even more important. To illustrate this, I'm going to share with you a Sfat Emet from yesterday's parasha. If you remember, Balak, the king of Moab, invites Bilam to come curse the people as he describes this threat that's on his borders. Hine am yatsa mimitzrayim. And yet, when Bilam is asked the first time by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, tell me, who are these messengers? What are they doing here? Bilam tells him what Balak says with one small change. Hine ha'am hayotze mimitzrayim. And the Sfat Emet says, Bilam understood the essence of the Jewish people with that simple change. For Balak, this was a people that left Egypt. Yatsa mimitzrayim. For Bilam, ha'am hayotze mimitzrayim, what does that mean literally? They're continuously leaving Egypt. They're always leaving Egypt. What does it mean that we're always leaving Egypt? Simply look at the 613 mitzvot that we have. 46 of them reference the fact that you should be able to do this. You should know how to treat the weak in your society. You should know the importance of giving days off, of having a Shabbat, because you were once slaves in Egypt. We took the historical experience, those 210 or 400 years in Egypt, but we did not relegate them to the past, never to be repeated or simply forgotten, stored away. Rather, we draw on them as a source of spiritual energy. And that's completely different. It's a dynamic approach to understanding history in general. How we understand the past helps us cope and helps us deal and helps us grow with the problems that we face. And what I want to try to suggest today is that is precisely the challenge that stands in front of Nehemia in chapter 9. Now let's take a quick look at the fundamental issues and a quick summary of the Sfarim, and then we'll go straight into text. When does this story take place? I understand there's a machloka between one opinion in Chazal that is articulated in Seder Olam and the modern historical record. For now, I'm going to bypass that. The pictures in front of you will show you where I fall. But it's important to note that Ezra and Nehemia is a very long book. It starts in 537, 538, when Cyrus Korash, Melech Parash, comes and he declares you can go home. But according to most scholars, it doesn't end until 445 before the Common Era, i.e., almost 100 years later. If you look at the outline on the page, you see that Ezra 1 to 6, the first return of the Jewish people, the first wave of Aliyah, takes place almost immediately. But then there's a pause. And for 58 years, the book is silent, history is silent. And then Ezra is given a mandate by the king to take more Jews back. If you look carefully, it appears the king's major concern was, just make sure the taxes come back to me. Ezra comes, he goes, and then a couple years later, 13 years later, Nehemia also goes to Israel. And the fundamental problem with this period of time is that it's not Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. For those who remember how Charles Dickens opens his masterpiece, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Ezra and Nehemia is a very different period entirely. It's not the best of times, and it's not the worst of times. It's not a time of crisis, but it's also not a time of redemption. On one hand, there really is no existential threat facing the people. Yet on the other hand, there's really no hope of a better future either. And why would this be bad? The answer is that, well, we can go through life and periods of life where things don't change. Things stay the same. All this takes place under the backdrop of what began with such tremendous optimism and hope. Yirmiyahu, Shani Terragan mentioned it earlier, Yirmiyahu had to deal with the false prophets who were telling the people, don't unpack your bags when you go to Bavel. Hananiah ben Azur in chapter 28, Yirmiyahu in chapter 29, in fact, sent a letter. Go there, plant, build houses, marry off your kids, because you know something? All these letters you're getting from Israel saying, don't unpack, just stay in the Motel 6 because pretty soon you're coming back, they're not true. Instead, he tells them, you're going to be staying there in Bavel for a very long period of time. Ki ko amar Hashem, ki lefi melot leBavel shivim shana afkod etchem. You will have to wait 70 years. He doesn't quite specify when those 70 years start, when they finish. But the message is, be prepared to wait. However, Vakimoti alechem et divrei hatov lashiv etchem al hamakom hazeh. I promise you after those 70 years are up, what's going to happen? I will return you to the land, to this good place. Kanochi yadati the machshavot asher nochi choshev alechem nu mashem machshavot shalom v'lo l'ra'ah. Letet lechem acharit v'tikva. There will be hope, there will be a future. It's just going to be delayed. But in 70 years, you will come back to Israel. The galut will be over. And at the beginning of the return, this is the optimism that motivates the people that come. Ezra only has 42,000 plus people with him, but with him are prophets who are telling the people, we are almost there, we're close. Haggai, Zechariah. We've heard quoted, I'd like to read it in its full context. Haggai chapter 2, perek bet. He says, I know what you're thinking. Mi bachem anishar sharara tabayit zebich fodo harishon. You've seen, is there anybody here who has seen the first Beit HaMikdash? And you're looking at this little shack built by IKEA and going, this is it? Miatem roimoto ata halo kamo ka'ayin beinechem. It's nothing in your eyes. Vata chazek Zerubbabel. But Zerubbabel, who is the political head of the community, be strong. V'chazek Yoshua ben Yehoyatzak HaKohen Gadol. And to the Yoshua, who's the Kohen Gadol, be strong. And not only to the leaders. V'chazek kol am ha'aretz ne'um Hashem. Hashem is telling you, be strong. Because pretty soon, ki kol mar Hashem tzvakot, I'm skipping a couple words. Od echad ma'at hivani marisha shamayim v'daretz. I'm going to shake up the world very soon. Very soon. And I promise you the result of that. Gadol yeh kavod habayit hazeh acharon min harishon. This house, this Beit HaMikdash, is going to be greater and grander and more magnificent than the first Beit HaMikdash. You won't believe your eyes. It's going to be wonderful. And everybody is so hopeful that this is what's going to happen. But how long can hope last when reality doesn't match? A day, a couple of days, a week, months, years. Zechariah and Haggai disappear from the scene. Their prophecies remained unfulfilled. And the Mefarshim immediately jump up and down and say, what happened? Rashi tries to give some interesting answers. He says, well, in fact, you should know that the second Beit HaMikdash, according to Chazal, lasted for 420 years. The first Beit HaMikdash only lasted for 410. So in fact, Haggai was not wrong. And also, says Rashi, and whenever Rashi gives two answers, you know he's not happy with the first. Hordos made the second Beit HaMikdash look really nice. After 350 years, 340 years maybe, 500 years if you by regular counting. But understand it did come to pass eventually. The Abarbanel, among all the Rishonim, is the one who consistently says from the beginning, you haven't read the Psukim correct. He wasn't referring to the second Beit HaMikdash, he was referring to the third. He does it here, he does it in Yechezkel. All the details of the Beit HaMikdash Yechezkel builds, they all refer to a third Beit HaMikdash. And he goes through tremendous gymnastics to try to convince everyone that that's the proper reading. However, the traditional answer, I think, still holds. The Gemara in Sota, Ad Yavor Amcha Hashem Ad Yavor Amzu Kanita, says, why does it say that Bnei Israel twice cross over into the land? Zobi Arishonah, this is the first entry of Bnei Israel into the land of Israel. Zobi Ashniyah, this is the second entry to the land of Israel. And the second entry was supposed to be as glorious and as grand as the first. Ela Shigaram Hachet. But, as always happens, sin gets in the way. Had Bnei Israel been deserving, then the actual redemption would have been marvelous. It would have been wonderful. Unfortunately, Bnei Israel are not deserving, and therefore, if you give a Class C effort, then you only get the grade C redemption. Gula comes according to performance. And that, I think, is alluded to back in Yirmiyahu. When Yirmiyahu sends his letter, he says that Hashem will remember you. V'karatem oti v'halachtem v'palaltem alai. U'matzatem ki dirsheni b'chol levavchem. I'm there for you if you call out to me. The implication, which Yirmiyahu does not say, is, if you don't call, I won't be there. So where are we now? Ezra and Nehemia. A period of time where there was tremendous hope, tremendous anticipation, but decades after decades and decades of disappointment. The people are there. There is a small Beit HaMikdash. There's a small community. It's not under threat, but it's not thriving. What to do now? Because we know whenever you have apathy and stagnation, it always leads to decay. If you're not moving forward, you're always moving backwards, says Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Spiritual growth, says Rabbi Salanter, is like a bird. A bird will keep going up as long as it starts flapping its wings. The moment you stop flapping, says Rabbi Beasley, is the moment that what happens? It starts to go down. And that's the state of the people when Ezra first comes. But that's not the only theme of Ezra, I want to suggest, simply. There are other themes that are subtle, and I want to share them with you now. Ezra first begins, the beginning line begins, Ubishnat echad Korash melech Paras, in the first year of Korash, the king of Persia, L'chalot devar Hashem mipnei Yirmiyahu ha'yir Hashem et ruach Korash melech Paras, that God rouses the spirit of Korash, v'yavor kol b'kol malchuto v'gam b'michtav lemor. How did every biblical book begin? These are the words of the Navi in the year of the king of Israel. There's no more king, not in Israel and not in Yehudah. They don't exist anymore. And more importantly, God is no longer speaking directly with his people. Who's speaking on God's behalf? Ironically, Korash, the Persian monarch. He claims to speak for God instead of Nevuah. Also, how is it given? Gamba michtav lemor. It's given with written letters. And written letters in Sefer Ezra are tremendously important. People, up until now, the Word of God has been conveyed by orally. As was so pointed out so wonderfully in the previous class on Yirmiyahu, the Navi would stand in the marketplace and there would speak to the people. You don't have this anymore. What you have are documents. There's a document from the king of Persia. There's a list of the names. There's a letter to the king of Persia. There's a counter letter. There's a letter back from the king of Persia. Ezra carries with him a document giving him power. Documents throughout Sefer Ezra now become tremendously important. And this carries on into Nehemia. And they write letters back and forth, and they sign documents. And this becomes the mavar, the transition between a people that lived once from direct communication with God, from voice to now, where the written word becomes prominent. Malachi says, Zichru Torat Moshe Avdi. Remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant. The Marikra and the Malbim both say there on the spot. Why should we remember the Torah of Moshe? Why now? Why is that more significant in the time of Malachi than any other time? Because up until now, if you did not know what the answer was or what to do, you could always turn to the Navi. Now Malachi is saying, study the Torah well, because that's the only source of information you're going to have in front of you. You'll no longer be able to work with the Navim. And we'll see a clear proof of that as we go into the Nehemia itself. But there is some good news. Ezra comes. And he starts to make change. And he starts to make small changes, and I've given the outline of the book. You can see what he does. He moves against those who, the intermarriage, the list of those intermarried, the reaction, they start to pray. And following him is a man called Nehemia ben Chilkiah, one of the great leaders of Jewish history. Chazal, interestingly enough, say, we're not giving you, Nehemia, the right to have your own book called after your own name. You don't deserve it. You're mezalzel b'rishonim, they say, you put down those who came before you. And we're going to see hints of that in the prayer that we're going to see today. And also you wrote in the first person. Who writes in the first person in Tanakh? But he writes about his accounts. He writes that he's serving the king wine. He hears about the horrid state of Yerushalayim, as he calls it in perhaps the most poignant phrase, Ir kivrot avotai. What was Jerusalem? The place of my father's graveyards. The way Israel. What was Israel? The dream used to be, you go to Israel to be buried there, right? That's what Israel. That's Yerushalayim. It's already from the time of Nehemia. People say, oh, I want to go to Yerushalayim to do what? That's where I want to die. That's not the way to build a living community. And Nehemia prays, and he fasts, and he doesn't look well, and the king, according to Rashi, thinks he's going to poison him. He says, what do you want, Nehemia? And Nehemia prays quickly, says, please let me say the right things, that the king hear my prayer. I want to go to Israel to rebuild. I hear the story, the fallen state of my people, please. And the king surprisingly says, go ahead. Here's the check. What do you need? Tell me what I can do for you. And Nehemia goes. And he goes and he sees the situation, and he's got the edict of the king in his back pocket, and he inspects. He goes at night immediately before, without anybody watching. He walks around at night, and he begins the reconstruction of the walls. And first thing he provides for the people, not another shir, not another base medrash, because they're important. But if you don't have the basic physical security that you won't be attacked at night, nothing else matters. And Nehemia gives them physical security. And there are threats against the workers. And then there are reprisals. And then he hears from a group of people, the impoverished members of society, and they say, Nehemia, we are barely making a living. And Nehemia understands that just as you need physical security in the land, you also need economic security. People have to know that they can eat and feed their families. And what does Nehemia do? He calls all the rich people of Yerushalayim together and he says, what loans do they owe you? And they can imagine, well, he owes me 100 and he owes me 1,000 and he owes me 500. Bring him here, let me see these documents. And he rips them up in front of them. All loans canceled. We're starting over. We're going to create a new society now based on economic equality, on social justice, just as much. And Nehemia understands, you can see the progression here. First, there's physical security from our outside enemies. Second, we make sure our society is not rotten from within. There's fairness, there's a sense of justice and of economic security. And now finally Nehemia can do what? Address the religious problems that have plagued the people. The lack of faith, the lack of trust. And because of their lack of faith and lack of trust, what do? Their religious observance has gone down. And to the point that many of them are intermarried. The end of Ezra, chapter 10, gives a list of 29 psukim of all the leaders of Yerushalayim who either they or their children were intermarried. So far the people have fallen. But how do you change people religiously? The first thing you do is you teach. And you teach and you teach and you teach. And that's exactly what Nehemia does. The people are gathered together on the 7th month in front of the water gate. There's a picture, by the way, of the walls that Nehemia built on page 2. You can see, compared to the walls nowadays, how small it is. But they're gathered together at the water gate, and they give Ezra, who had been silent for apparently 13 years, Ezra, come, read us the Torah one more time. We're ready to listen now. To men, to women, to all those who can understand. And Ezra stands there and he begins to read the Torah. And he blesses the people, and the people answer Amen, and they bow down. But notice verse 8. Vayikru b'sefer Torah Elohim mefurash b'shum sechel vayavinu b'mikra. He doesn't just read it. It's a teaching experience so that everybody understands it. Again in chapter 14, in verse 14. Sorry. We'll skip 2 verses. Verse 12. And the people are beginning to rejoice because suddenly, they understand this now. And this just doesn't happen once. Verse 18 tells us, Vayikra b'sefer Torah Elohim Yom b'yom min hayom harishon ad yom ha'acharon v'yasu chag shivat yamim. Every day of Sukkot, they repeat the ceremony. Because real education understands that there's planting. You plant the seed, but you've got to continue to water and to nurture and to help the plant grow. Again and again and again. And in the process, they transform the people from ignorant and unknowing to knowledgeable and able to participate. This is such a dramatic change. For the first time, you see here what Nehemia has done. He's provided people with physical security. He's given them economic substance. And now he's turned them into educated members who are capable of making their own, of understanding the decisions that they have to make. And now, let's learn a little. For those who have the source sheets, we're starting on the prayer that Nehemia, that the people offer. Interestingly enough, there's a wonderful, what Rabbi Beasley called a delicious ambiguity. We're not even sure who says this prayer. The prayer begins in chapter 9, verse 6. If you look at chapter 9, verse 5, is it the Levim who say the prayer? Or is it the people? According to the Targum Shivim, they add the words, and Ezra said these words, but I don't think it's necessary, and it doesn't fit in with the Spirit. Because in fact, the whole point of this prayer is to demonstrate how all the people have reached a level where they can now participate in understanding their past. And through understanding their past, what do? They're able to now plan ahead for a better future. Let's look pieces of verse 6. By the way, for those who, one of the great things, Mikra, for those who study Navi, it's a little side point. I'm not getting paid to sell their books, just for the record. But one of the great things Mikra has done is before every Nevuah, it's a wonderful exercise for educators. Read the whole chapter. How would you split it up? So I gave myself that challenge before coming here, and here are the four sections that we have. The first section, I think most of you recognize. Unless, like me, you're habitually late to Minyan, and you find yourself skipping it along the way. These here are the 6 verses that appear after the Psuke de Zimra of the Halalukas, before the saying of Shirat Hayam. They're placed here. I can't prove this, but I'll give an example from somewhere else to let you think I'm thinking. We say in Shema, the first 2 chapters are chapter 6 in Devarim, Ve'ahavta Hashem Lokecha, and chapter 11, Vayayim Shamoah. What is chapter 6 to chapter 11 of Sefer Devarim? It's the 6-chapter-long speech in which Moshe Rabbeinu outlines the fundamentals, the basic fundamentals of Jewish faith, what we call the Ikarei Emunah. Here are the things about Emunah that you need to know. And when we include chapter 6 to chapter 11 in Shema, I think in fact what's being said is chapter 6 and chapter 7 and chapter 8 and chapter 9 and chapter 10, concluding with chapter 11. We can't make Shema that long though. We never get to Shemona Esrei. But by putting the beginning chapter and the last chapter of that section, it may be that in fact the people who read it say, yeah, they want us to remember the entire thing. Similarly here, by putting the beginning words of this chapter for people who are literate in Tanakh, Chazal may be saying, I want you to remember this entire prayer, all 31 verses. So let's take a look at the beginning. Between God and Israel, the promise, or what I call the foundations of Emunah. Atahu Hashem levadecha. Ata asita shmayim v'shmei shmayim v'kol tzvam haaretz. V'kol asher alei hayamim asher bahem v'ta mechayet kula. V'ta mechayet kula. I forgot one there. Please, for those who are following along with a pen, fill in the word again. V'ta. Utzva shmayim l'chamish tachavim. 3 times in the first verse, what does it say? Ata, Ata, Ata. You are God, the only God, parallel to what we would call, what we say in Tefillah, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. There's only one God. You are God who created the world, and you, God, you Hashem, not only created the world once, but you continually sustain it, keep it alive to this day. Fundamental issues of emunah, what we call ekronot of emunah, but more importantly is what word here is repeated, ata, ata, ata. And why in Hebrew is that so important? Because you don't need it. You can do without the pronoun. Not the first one. Ata Hashem levadecha. Asita teshmaim. Do I know that it's the word ata from the word asita? Of course. It's the way the Hebrew verb system works. Michayet kulam. Ata. You're the one it could be referring to. Yet it makes a point of repeating the words ata, ata, ata. There's one more ata here. We're going to hear the word ata echo again throughout the tefillah. Let's pay attention to this repetition of this word. Having discussed God's relationship with the world as a whole, i.e., what we would call Breshit, Aleph to Yud Aleph, Ata hu Hashem Elokim asher bacharta ba'Avram, ve'otzot miras kasdim, v'samta shmo Avraham, v'tzata levavot ne'ma lefanecha. You are Hashem who creates a relationship with an individual, specifically an individual who came from the area of Bavel, something that was spoken very to his listeners, who were, if not first generation's returnees, but descended from people who returned from Bavel. You spoke to a man in Bavel. His name was Avraham. You found him Naaman. And keep that word in mind, Naaman. You found him faithful. V'charoti mo habrit. And because you found him faithful, what did you do? You made a brit, a covenant. And that covenant is the land of Israel. Skipping to the last three words of the verse 8, pasuk chet, and you will keep these words, ki tzadik ata. So for 5 times in the first 3 verses, God is the subject. God is not only, however, somebody who is who creates the world passively, he sustains it, but on a national level, he creates relationships with people, and if they are honest and trustworthy, he rewards them with the land of Israel. So far, something we say every day. V'tered ani avotenu b'Mitzrayim. You saw our fathers suffer in Egypt. V'takam shemata al Yam Suf. And you heard their cry to Yam Suf. And therefore, what did you do? You gave them signs and wonders against Paro and all his ki yadata ki yizedu alehem v'tasam shem kayom hazeh. I've bolded those last 2 words, but let's just summarize quickly. Not only did you heard, our fathers were there. Please pay attention to the word avotenu. It's going to change in a minute. Our fathers were there, they in trouble, and they cried out. How did you respond when they cried out? You gave miracles, and you saved them. And in doing so, you made for yourself a name, Ad Hayom Hazeh. What does it mean to make a name? What does it mean to make a name? Ad Hayom Hazeh. Why is it important that God makes a name, Ad Hayom Hazeh? Sorry? Ki Hayom Hazeh. What does that mean? As you are doing today. There's a bridge being made between the miracles God did in the past when people cried out to him. There's an implicit connection. Just as the people called out to you then, so too what? We're going to call out to you now. And now notice a shift in the Hebrew. Vayam bakati lifneim. Vayiru tochem eshah. Re'ofoteim hishlachtu b'tzvot. K'mo evim b'mayim azim. It's going down to the next one. V'amud anan, hinachta yomam v'amud esh laila. What just happened? Sorry? Went from first to third. Well, the people went from first to third person, and that's important. Okay? No longer is it avotenu. All of a sudden there's a distancing from the speakers now, in the time of Nehemia, to the people who are involved in the story. And we'll come back to this, it's tremendously important. In Hebrew, what else happened? What signified the shift? in Tanakh, normally we have the verb and the noun, right? Suddenly, vayam bakata. Mudanan hinachtam. Noun, verb. All of them, the emphasis is not on. And by doing so, where's the emphasis placed? On the very natures of the miracles that God is going to do. If you look carefully at the second section, it's a very strange thing that happens. Instead of verb noun, most of them become noun verb. And you'll say, so what? Well, let's take a look at what's involved here. Ma'udanan hinachta yomam. So all of a sudden we now have they are being led by a pillar at night. A cloud in the day and a pillar at night. V'al har Sinai yiradata. V'diber hem mishamayim. V'diten lehem mishpatim misharim Torah temet chukim mishpat u'misvot tovim. And what have you done? You at Har Sinai, you came down to speak to them, and you gave them laws. What isn't given at Har Sinai? When I think of Har Sinai, I think there's something more fundamental, but it's not there. What was happened at Har Sinai? Sorry? Well, let's hold the bad news for a second, okay? At Matan Torah, do we simply look at Matan Torah as, well, here's your law book, go study it. Triag mitzvot. Good luck, guys. Brit. The law is a reflection, they're an aspect of a covenant, an agreement, of a relationship between two people. But that's missing here. Because where is the Brit in the eyes of Nehemia, in the time of Nehemia, the people who are speaking now? Not in the time of Sinai, but from what? Abraham. Chazal state, interestingly enough, Brit Sinai ran out. When Bnei Yisrael broke the mitzvot, the Brit between God and Bnei Yisrael, Brit Sinai, it ran out. But Brit Avot doesn't run out. And Nehemia seems to be intentionally drawing upon that or alluding to that tradition for reasons we're going to see. How many separate things does God do for Bnei Yisrael before they mess up? Excuse the colloquialism. He brought them guidance, right? Amud Anan, Amud Eish. That's number one. He gave them mitzvot, number two. And it specifies, interesting enough, et Shabbat kodshecha hodata lahem. Mitzvot u'chukim Torah tiveit lahem b'yad Moshe avdecha. Three, lechem shemayim. Who can forget that, right? We've got man. Mayim misela. You take, and not only do you get bread and you get water, but you get it in the most miraculous ways. God goes out of his way to demonstrate, this is a gift, this is for you. Finally, v'tomar lehem lavo l'reshet et ha'aretz asher nasati yedcha letehem. And God says, I'm giving you gift 4 now, if you're ready. What's that gift? The land. And here comes perhaps the hardest phrase. Vehem bavotenu hezidu. What's the problem? In the first 3 words. In verse 16. Vehem. Well, it sounds like the same thing, right? I don't know. Let's rephrase the question. What you're saying, and they and our fathers acted wrongly, acted proudly. They were mezid in some way, shape, or form. But is it them? Or is it our fathers? Now notice what's happened. The word fathers appeared once before, right? When did it appear? When did the word fathers, avotenu, appear before? All right, v'teradoni avotenu. You saw our suffering of our fathers. That was our fathers. It wasn't our fathers, vehem. But now all of a sudden it's our fathers, but notice what's happening. There's an effect here of, our fathers, but the fathers that we acknowledge that they're our fathers, but they are functionally him. They're third person. They're not connected to us. And vayikshud orpam lo shamu et mitzvotecha. And then what sin do they do? Vayimanu lishmoa. Doesn't tell me what. I'm hearing they're not doing something. V'lo zichru niflotecha asher asite mahem. They don't remember the goodness that you did for them. Vayikshud orpam. Vayitnu rosh lishuv mitzrayim. What sin is that? And they said, we're going to go a point ahead. Let's go back to Egypt. Where are those words from? Meraglim. The first thing Nehemia says when he talks about the sins of the fathers in the desert, the first thing that comes to mind, Meraglim. Vayishuvu rosh l'shuv l'avodatam b'Miriam va'ata. You. Remember that? That word you? That word you is going to appear significantly here in a different context. Eloha slichot chanun rachum erech apayim v'rav chesed. You are, what's he quoting here now? The superb. This is the Gimel Midot. And you were merciful. You didn't forget that. You didn't leave them alone. Va'af ki asu lehem egel masicha. And what else did they do? Egel masicha is the chet egel, the golden calf. And they said, Elohecha asher alecha miMitzrayim. Again in verse 19, V'ata beracham acharim lo azavtum b'midbar. So this is fascinating. Because what's the questions we should be asking now? We've just had a list of all the things God did for Bnei Israel. And then we said, they sin, and God were merciful. They sin again, and you were merciful. But what were those two sins? What were those two sins? Meraglim and chet egel. Out of order. Interesting. Meraglim and chet egel, they're out of order. Why would Nehemia put them out of order? Nehemia, apparently they've been reading Torah for the past 7-8 days. Why would Nehemia put them out of order when he's making this tefillah here? So I'm going to try to throw some ideas. And again, these are suggestions. These are not Torah Misinai. The first, and I think this is important, is that Nehemia wants to go out of his way to put the recitation of the Gimel Midot before Chet Egel, not afterwards. It's important that God's mercy is before Bnei Israel sin and not just after when they sin. But more importantly, and this is a theme I'm going to try to prove in the next section, what's a greater sin in Nehemiah's eyes? Avodah Zarah. Really? Then why does that go first? And we had to mention earlier of what was said in the Mishnah and Ta'anit. What's a worse fast stage? Tisha B'Av or Shiva Asar Tammuz? We would assume Tisha B'Av, right? It's longer. I'm hungry now, but it's going to be much worse. I think we're all hungry. Okay, and I appreciate the patience that you have. But what do Chazal do? In second place, for the Shiva Asar Tammuz, what sin do they attribute to it? Chet Egel. But the worst sin that there is, the sin that seals the deal, rejection of Eretz Yisrael. It's a big statement. And this would be drash, if not for a pasuk that's coming up. So please don't leave just yet. Now, how does God show his kindness a second time? This, I think, is the most powerful part. Verse 19, perek pasuk yutet. Lo azavtem b'midbar et amud ha'anan lo sar me'elam bayom lancham chotam b'derech v'amud esh b'layla. In other words, how does God show his mercy? Everything he did beforehand, without fail, without exception, is going to be repeated again in the next few verses. You gave them light, and you gave them guidance through the Amud HaEsh v'Amud HaAnan. You did. He keeps doing it. Rucha tova natata laskilam. You gave them good spiritual instruction, and that's a short form for all the mitzvot that were given earlier. Manchalom manatami piem v'mayim natatam l'tzomam. You gave them man, you gave them water. And not only that, he expands on it 40 years. You gave them more foods. Beforehand, that's all they needed, man and water. But now if you're going to spend 40 years in the desert, you better bring a larger suitcase. You'll have to bring them 40 years in the midbar. Lo chasru simotam lo valu ragleim lo batziku. They never ran out of clothing, never out of shoe wear. They did fine. So what's the one thing that God didn't do for them? Remember at the beginning there were 4 things. I'm going to give you guidance. I'm going to give you mitzvot. I'm going to give you physical substance, and I'm going to bring you into the land of Israel. The second section ends with, and even though you did all these things, I'm giving you guidance, and I'm giving you mitzvot, and I'm giving you substance. What's missing? Turn the page. Let's get them to Eretz Yisrael, please. And now the people come to Eretz Yisrael. And here, the structure is very simple. We're going to read through it quickly. You gave them kingships and kingdoms and nations. The first 4, 5 verses are very simple. Everything that every great things God did, He gave them kingship. He gave this, and they are able to inhabit. They win the battles. They subdue the inhabitants. They have places to live. And not only do they have places to live, look at verse 25. Fortified cities. Adamash Mena, fat lands. V'yushu batim laim kol tuv. The houses are filled with all the great things that you can have in the world. Borot, chatzuvim, kramim, zaitim, eitz machal, arov, vineyards, olive groves, fruit trees. Vayochlu, vayispu, vayashminu. They eat, they become satiated. Vayashminu, and they become fat. This is not a commercial for Jack LaLanne Diet Center or Weight Watchers programs. When the Tanakh uses the word vayashmin, what is it? What instinctively are you expecting to hear? Vayishma v'yishum vayivot. They're going to fight back. You can eat too much, and that's the beginning of the rebellion. They overdid themselves. And how do they do it? Well, I hate reading these parts of the... There are certain sections that are very difficult to read. If you're really reading it properly, it should not be easy to read this. Vayamaru vayirmudu b'cha. They became disobedient, they rebel against you. Vayishlichu et toratecha acharei gavam v'neviyecha haragu asher hiyidu vayam lavshivam elecha v'yasu natzot gdolot. And they rebel, and they throw the Torah away, and they kill the prophets. Vatidem biyad tzarehem, v'yad tzarubahem. They delivers them into the hands of the enemies. Bet tzaratam, ziyasaku alecha. And when they were suffering, they called out to you. Va'ata, and you, recalling, when was the last time va'ata used? Ata is all, notice it keeps repeating. Ata, you God are merciful, you God are merciful. Va'ata, mishamayim tishma, k'rachamecha rabim titen lehem moshiyim, v'yoshium miyad tzarehim. What book did we, sorry? Did we skip something chronologically? What did he skip? He skipped entering into the land. Well, the first half, I think, was the entering, the settling. But what book was that? One verse. He was able to condense an entire book of Tanakh into one verse. What book is that? Shoftim. You sin, you're going to get punished. But if you call out b'tzara, if there's a tzaka, b'tishma, God will hear, and He will send a Moshiach. This is the book of Shoftim. Well, okay. If the first 4 verses are the entry to the land, i.e., Sefer Yoshua, and then I have Shoftim, what should be next? Shmuel. I'm going to go with the Latin version for a second, or the Targum Shivim, one of the versions. We know of how many books of Shmuel? 1. We split it into 2. But in fact, in the Targum Shivim, there's 4 books, which are really one of Melachim, Registratum, the Book of Kings. Book of Kings 1, Kings 2, Kings 3, Kings 4. Because really, what is Shmuel? Shmuel is the introduction to Sefer Melachim. So I'm expecting Nehemia to do what? What am I expecting him to start discussing? Having disposed of the entire period of Shoftim in a verse, I would expect him to do what? Talk to me about Melachim for a second. Verse 28, Pasuk Chavchet. V'noach lachem, when it's comfortable again, v'yashuvu la'asod hara lefanecha, v'tazvem b'yadavem, v'yirdu bahem, v'yashuvu v'yitzakucha, v'tam mishamayim tishma, v'tatzilem b'recha mecha rabot itim. He doesn't say that. Instead, he goes through this period of Shoftim again and again and again. If things are good, you always rebel. And this happened again. And every time you were in trouble, you called out, I was there to help. And I warned them, says God. You warned them. And yet, they, again, the emphasis here is the word, they. What is it not? It's not our fathers. Our fathers is long gone. These are not our fathers. In fact, the proof of that can be found back up in Pasuk Chaf Gimel. Asher amarta lavotehem. Their fathers, not our fathers. And that's an effect we're going to talk about in the summary very quickly. This happens again and again and again and again. You warn them, you do everything possible to try to help them. They don't listen. And so as a result of that, I'm in verse 31 because I want to get to the ending quickly, because the ending is going to be perhaps the most fascinating part. V'rachamecha rabim lo asita kala. And because you were kind, you didn't destroy them. Lo azavtem ki el rachum v'chanun ata. What's missing? Melachim, Nevi'im, they allude to the fact that every time he sent a Navi, the Nevi'im got killed. Yirmiyahu can consider himself lucky. Galut. There's no hint that God finally punished him and throws up his hands and says, that does it, I'm stopping this experiment, we're going to go to Bavel, in 70 years we're going to start over. Nehemia skips so many parts of history. And the question is why? Instead, he leaves us hanging. Hanging specifically where? Remember our Shoftim cycle? If you sin, you'll be punished. If you cry out, you'll be saved. If you sin, we'll be punished. And now comes the brilliance of what Nehemia does. The concluding prayer. Va'ata, and now. Elokeinu. Ha'el hagadol hagibor v'anora. And Chazal learned from here a fascinating lesson. Nehemia feels very comfortable calling God not only God, but God who is great, and God who is powerful, and God who is awesome. Who couldn't say these words? Yirmiyahu. Daniel. Yirmiyahu says, there are goyim running around the Beit HaMikdash. I can't say ha'el ha'gadol ha'gibor. Where's the norah? Where's the awe? And Daniel says, the goyim, the Jews are scattered among the nations. Where is your power, God? I can't say it. Taking this an ancient form, but it would be inauthentic for them to say it. Nehemia says, I view you as the full God with all of the powers that you have. Shomer HaBrit. We're back to what? The Brit, but which Brit? Avram. V'achesed. All this hardship, from the time of Melech Ashur to this day, that has come upon us. And listen carefully. Matzatanu. L'malachenu l'kohenenu sarvenu nevienu avotenu. L'kol amecha. Mimei melchei Ashur ad hayom hazeh. Now that bridge that was back in verse 10, you have a name for saving people when they call out. That's what you did then, remember? When they called out to you, you saved them. God, look now at all of our troubles that have befallen us since the time of us, Ashur. Vatat tzaddik. Where did he previously say that? Vatakem et devarecha ki tzaddik. Ata, go back to the beginning section. You, God, you keep your word. You are tzaddik. And now we are holding you to the fact that you are tzaddik. Ata tzaddik al kol ba'aleinu. Ki emet asita, v'nachnu hirshanu. Everything you've done is true. We've sinned. But here's the most fascinating thing. In Daniel Tet, Daniel says we sinned. In Ezra Tet, Ezra says we sinned. And what follows after they say we sinned? A list of the sins that the people are doing. What does Nehemia do? Verse 34, Pasuk Lamadalad, Malachenu sarenu kohenenu avotenu lo asu Toratecha. Because those people in the past didn't keep your Torah. In fact, we didn't sin. I know I said we sinned, but in fact, who am I referring to? Avotenu. Rabbi Beasley asked, where do we have a proof in the Torah that Nevuah has ended? For those who want to take a quick look, compare between Lamed Bet and Lamed Daled. You want to see the end of Nevuah? There it is. But what's really important here is the use of the Hebrew pronouns. There's Atah. There's you, God. There's Haim. The Jews who came before us. And there's Anachnu. Us now. And what Nehemia has subtly said is that we, the people now, are not the same people who have sinned and continue to sin and have been engaged in a pattern of sinning and of failure and of missed opportunities for hundreds and hundreds of years. Because can you imagine to yourself what it's like to be a Jew? And you look and you say, why is this happening? And the answer? We're sinners. Well, is there anything I can do? Can I look back at Jewish history and find a solution? Well, let's look through Jewish history. Time of Yoshua, they become fat. That leads to sin. The time of Shoftim, they sin again. How were they in the desert? Oh, they sinned then too. How about in the time of the Malachim? Guess what? Guess what? They sinned. Do you understand how debilitating that is? How can you not but throw up your hand and say, listen, we're destined. We're destined. Look at our history. This is who we are. We never get it right. This is what Nehemia is fighting with. A belief that the people have that how can they change? We've been trying to change for, when you try to change a bad habit, if the first time you fail and the second time you fail, a week, 2 weeks. How would an 800, 900-year-old habit? Is that possible? Is there any hope? And this is what Nehemia does. And it's so brilliant. You're not connected to them. Where are you connected? To Avram. I'm going to see that right now. You are not connected to the generations of failures. You are sons of Avram Avinu. But first, let's finish quickly the chapter. V'hem b'malchutcham b'tuvcha harav asher natat lehem ba'aretz harachava shmeina asher natat lifneim lo avducha. Our fathers in third person didn't serve you. V'lo shavum alei amaraim. But what is the result? Hinei anachnu Hayom avadim. They didn't serve you, and now we, anachnu, are avadim. Avadim, not to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but to Korash, to Pras. You, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is where we are. The land that you gave to our fathers to eat, its fruit, to enjoy. Hine anachnu avadim. You heard that phrase before just recently? We were slaves on it. By the way, there's a wonderful comment. Why does he not mention Galut? Because there's another thing that Nehemia is worried about. If God can kick you off once, can he kick you off twice? You better believe it. And one can imagine that community is looking at themselves saying, we're not really growing, we're not thriving, we're not surviving. At best, we're like one of these tumbleweeds, in the desert. Holds on, but the wind is strong enough, what happens? And you can see my metaphors, or Eretz Yisrael metaphors, Baruch Hashem. Okay, but the tumbleweed in the desert, what happens? If the wind is strong enough, it will be uprooted and blown away. These people are worried. Can we make the changes that are necessary? Is it even possible? Look at our history. And they're also worried, well, God has kicked us out once. Maybe God will do it again. What Nehemia does subtly, he says, no. Galut? I don't know of any Galut. Who said anything about Galut? Our situation now is we today are slaves on our land. As was so vividly expressed by Rabbi Shalom in his discussion of Echahe. Look at this, look at what we are. We are slaves. By the way, this is really very interesting because when Ezra talks about the king of Paras, it's very respectful. Very, very respectful. Because Ezra, when he talks about Paras, says, Hashem, thank you so much for giving us such a good king as opposed to a king that could really make our life difficult. Nehemia is subtly saying, let's not get too used to this situation. Let's not entirely forget that we were meant to be a free people in a free land. But he finishes, we are in a bad shape. He doesn't say remove Paras directly. He's more pragmatic. He's more realistic than that. He doesn't say, well, let's bring Mashiach, Hashem, right now. Bring Mashiach right now. He doesn't even say that. You know what else he doesn't say? He doesn't say that Hashem promised that if you do good, it's all going to be reversed. All he promises is that if you do bad, the situation will continue. He doesn't raise the expectations too high. He also, by the way, has forgotten about Yerushalayim. Mikdash is not a big thing. The important thing is that we have a place here in the land. But most importantly, and I'm sorry for not putting this in, is the first verse of the next page, of the next chapter. Listen carefully to how the prayer ends. And here you're going to have to listen. I apologize, it didn't come out on the print. Uvechol zot anachnu kortim amanah. And despite everything that's happened to us, despite the situation we're in, despite the fact that we're not free people, despite the fact that we are suffering, we make an amanah. In English it's translated, we make a pledge. We sign right now in front of you. Because that's what they did, you signed it. But amanah, says the Malbim, the shorosh of amanah, what's a pledge? Aman. Ne'aman. Just like Avram, you found Avraham to be faithful, and when you found Avram to be faithful back at the beginning of the tefillah, what happened? You made a brit with him, and you took him out of Bavel, and you took him out of Ur Kasdim, and you brought him, and you gave him this wonderful land. Now, says the Malbim, look what happens. Nehemiah's got the people together, and they're saying, we're making a brit, Hashem, with you. We willingly choose to make a brit with you. Because we are the descendants not of those avotenu avotehem, those people who sinned. But we are the descendants, we are the spiritual descendants of Avram Avinu. It really is perhaps the most brilliant reframing of Jewish history ever done. Because when Nehemia leaves 4 chapters later, he leaves behind a functioning, vibrant community that is going to last for hundreds of years. And how does he do it? He takes a look at the people. A people that are suffering, a people that have lost hope, a people who believe that even if they do well, you know something, history always repeats itself. And Jews always make mistakes. And Jews always screw up. And we never get it right. And he says, you know something? We can choose to be different. And our relationship with God does not have to be based on immediate reward and punishment. If everything goes right, we should be happy. And everything goes bad, we should be sad. We simply put ourselves, we say, God, we call out to you now. He left that cycle open. Now we're in a situation of B'tzara Anachnu, we're suffering. But God, I want you to know, of our ancestors, we can choose which path we choose to follow. We are free. And that's the greatest freedom, to be able to choose. And by offering the people a choice between the ne'emanut, the faithfulness, the righteousness of Avram Avinu, and the failures of the generations that succeeded him, he gives them hope for the first time that things can be different and things can change. And perhaps this is the best lesson for rebuilding, whether it's on a personal level, when you go through these moments where you feel, I can't do it, I keep trying to do the diet, but the ice cream just keeps saying, come over, let's be friends, why are you avoiding me? Or whether it's on a national level, where it seems that we keep making the mistakes over and over and over again. The reality is we are capable of change. We are capable of growth. And by rewriting and reframing and the history of the people, Nehemia is ultimately able to rebuild the people and keep them on their land. And that, I think, is the best lesson that we can take. Here's how we respond to Khurban, by starting over and with our heads held high, with lots of hope. Thank you very much for having me.